What if the biggest battle you'll ever face isn't some giant looming over you, but that little voice of fear whispering in your ear? It's wild, right? That's the real fight we all deal with every day. Welcome back to Bible Stories Explained. Today we'll dive deep into one of the most well-known stories in Scripture, David and Goliath. But beyond the slingshot and the stone, this story is about something far greater: how faith in God overcomes even our biggest fears. Let's jump right into it. We find ourselves in ancient Israel, where two mighty armies, Israel and the Philistines, are camped on opposite hillsides, facing each other across a valley. It's a tense standoff, a battle waiting to happen. From the Philistine side emerges a giant named Goliath. Now, this guy isn't your average Joe. He's over 9 feet tall, decked out in heavy armor from head to toe, and he wields a spear as thick as a weaver's beam. Day after day, this giant stands in the valley and taunts the Israelites. He yells, "Hey Israelites, pick someone my size and send him down to fight me. If he takes me out, you'll make us your slaves. But if I take him out, then you'll be our slaves instead." Can you imagine the fear that must have gripped the Israelites as they witnessed this every day? They were terrified. King Saul, the leader of Israel, trembled at the mere sight of this giant, and the whole Israelite army was paralyzed by fear. They couldn't believe their eyes. Here they were, a whole nation ready to go to war, and they couldn't do anything because of this one guy. This giant Goliath had become a huge obstacle, a seemingly insurmountable challenge. Now, during those times of dread and despair, people often turn to those they love for support and encouragement. So while Saul and the other Israeli soldiers were scared and unsure of what to do, they probably turned to God in prayer, seeking comfort and guidance. Perhaps they prayed for God to intervene, to protect them from harm, or to give them the strength to face their fears. They probably hoped for a miracle. In their time of need, they poured out their hearts to God, asking for help, for wisdom, and for the courage to confront this seemingly impossible situation. It was at this point that young David, a shepherd boy, arrived at the battlefield carrying food for his brothers who were in the army. He must have been shocked to see the massive giant taunting the Israeli troops. He heard Goliath's boasts and watched as the Israeli soldiers shrank in fear. That's when something extraordinary happened. As David looked at the giant, he didn't see an unbeatable opponent. Instead, he saw an opportunity to defend his people and to honor God. Now, this might sound simple, but let's break it down. Why did David see an opportunity while others saw only a threat? Well, it comes down to perspective. David didn't let his emotions get the best of him. Even though everyone around him was afraid, he didn't let that fear control him. Instead, he thought about his faith and trust in God. This gave him the strength to face the giant. Even though he was just a young boy with nothing but a slingshot, David's reaction to Goliath is a powerful lesson in facing our challenges. It reminds us that our perspective matters. In moments of crisis, when fear and uncertainty loom large, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. However, by anchoring ourselves to our faith and focusing on our values, we can transform fear into courage and challenges into opportunities. Just as David didn't let fear dictate his response to Goliath, we, too, can choose to rise above our fears and embrace the opportunities that await us. So how did David take on this giant? What made him think he could win? Well, it started with these words: "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" These words show us that David didn't just see Goliath as a big, scary soldier. He saw him as an enemy of God's people, an outsider who didn't respect the God of Israel. And this really upset David. You see, David had a deep faith in God. He knew that God was with his people, and he wasn't going to stand by while someone else mocked and threatened his God. That's why David responded so bravely. He wanted to protect his people and his God. But let's get back to the story. David asked King Saul for permission to take on Goliath, but Saul tried to stop him. You see, Saul was afraid and he didn't want David to get hurt, so he offered David his own armor, the king's armor, thinking that if David wore it, he would have a better chance against Goliath. But David refused to wear it. He knew that he couldn't fight in armor that wasn't his own. He needed to use his own skills and weapons to take on the giant. Now, some of you might be thinking, but what could a slingshot do against a giant, especially one wearing armor? Well, for David, it wasn't just about the size of his weapon. It was about his faith in God. He believed that God would help him, and that's what gave him the courage to take on Goliath. Before facing the giant, David gathered 5 smooth stones and chose his trusty sling. He then ran toward Goliath, yelling, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. I will give your body to the birds and beasts of the field." Isn't that incredible? Even though Goliath was big and scary, David wasn't afraid. He trusted in God to help him win. And in a blink, David took aim and threw a stone that hit Goliath right between the eyes. Imagine the shock and surprise as the giant crumpled to the ground, face down in the dust. David wasted no time. He ran as fast as he could toward the fallen giant, grabbed Goliath's own sword and cut off his head. As soon as the Philistines saw their champion lying on the ground, they lost all hope. They turned tail and ran away, and Israel chased after them, winning a great victory. David, the brave young shepherd, had taken down the seemingly invincible giant, not with brute force, but with unwavering faith in God. Let's pause for a moment and think about what this story teaches us. What can we learn from David and his victory over Goliath? One of the most important lessons from this story is that our biggest enemy isn't always what we think it is. Sure, Goliath was a real threat, but the thing that truly held Israel back was fear. Fear paralyzed the Israelites. They couldn't see a way to win. They were stuck in a valley of worry and defeat. On the other hand, David saw things differently. He looked at Goliath, the giant, and saw not an unbeatable opponent, but an opportunity to defend his people and honor God. He didn't let fear control him. Instead, he focused on his faith. He trusted in God and knew that God was with his people. This gave him the strength to face Goliath, even though he was just a young boy with nothing but a sling. In our lives, we face many challenges and problems. Sometimes these problems seem small, and sometimes they seem overwhelming. But remember, our biggest enemy isn't always what we see, but what we feel inside. Fear, worry, discouragement, these are our real opponents. The good news is that we don't have to face these problems alone. We have God on our side. Just like David had God's help, we can ask God for strength and guidance. Another important lesson from this story is that God often chooses the weak to do his work. David was the youngest son of Jesse, and nobody expected him to take on the giant Goliath. But God chose David for this special task. Why? Because God wanted to show everyone that he could use anyone to accomplish his goals. It didn't matter that David was small or that he didn't have much experience. What mattered was his faith in God. This story reminds us that we don't need to be the strongest or the smartest to do God's work. All we need is faith in God and a willingness to follow him. Lastly, the story teaches us that the battles we face aren't ours alone. The victory over Goliath wasn't David's alone. It was God's victory. When David faced the giant, he didn't say, "I will defeat Goliath." Instead, he said, "The Lord will deliver me from his hands." David knew that it wasn't his strength or his skill that would win the battle, but God's power. This story reminds us that we don't have to try to do everything ourselves. We can rely on God's help and strength when we face our challenges. Friends, as we close this Bible story, let's remember that David didn't defeat Goliath because he was stronger. He won because his faith was greater than his fear. And the same God who gave him victory is the same God who walks with you today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with friends. We've got lots of other videos that will help you understand the Bible better, so keep watching. God bless you.